Next on Currents News, Hurricane Dorian is a killer, taking lives as it pounded the Bahamas. Now the storm is turning towards the east coast of the U.S. Investigators are searching for answers after a scuba diving boat exploded in flames off California. Many people died in the disaster.
Pope Francis announced 13 new Cardinals. Though none of them are American, one has a special connection to a church in Queens. I'm Tim Harfman, and I'll explain.
Plus special team coverage as Pope Francis is getting ready for an important journey to Africa. He takes off tomorrow for 3 sub-Saharan nations seeking peace and reconciliation. The news starts right now. After ripping a path of death and destruction through the Bahamas, millions of Americans are on alert as Hurricane Dorian threatens several states on the mainland. Good evening, I'm Emily Druby. The storm is still a monster and it's forecast to move dangerously close to Florida later tonight. Also at risk, Georgia, the Carolinas, and Virginia. Whitney Wild reports the very latest from Melbourne, Florida.
More days to go. The threat is not over.
Hurricane Dorian is beginning to move northwest away from the Bahamas after several days of fluctuating forecasts, new projections, and dire warnings from officials. It will approach Florida Tuesday night, but has already begun hammering parts of the coast, delivering challenges on several fronts.
We're going to get rain, we're going to get storm surge, and people don't realize the storm surge is deadly.
Dorian has shown its potential for massive destruction, pounding the Bahamas for more than 24 hours, leaving buildings in ruin and residents without homes.
Persons are still trapped in the homes. The water levels are rising in their areas. Up to almost 15 and 20 feet in some areas in some homes.
The concern now for Florida's east coast, heavy rain, gusty winds, and major storm surge. Power outages are likely, along with the threat of floods.
So we have to prepare from North Carolina to Florida, and we're prepared to support our state partners up and down the coast.
Dorian will then set its sights on Georgia and the Carolinas over the next several days. For now, those in the storm's path will just watch, wait, and hope for the best. In Melbourne, Florida, I'm Whitney Wild.
Dorian slammed into the Bahamas as one of the strongest storms in the Atlantic on record. Wind gusts topped 200 miles an hour and the hurricane hovered over the Bahamas for a day and a half. At least 5 people died. Officials haven't yet been able to search many of the homes destroyed or damaged by the storm. Kelly McKee lost his home and sought shelter outside.
I am currently inside of a car. My home, the roof is gone. It's taking in water. It's flooding everywhere, and it's unbearable to live at right now. It's very windy. We cannot see at all. The only thing we can really see is the U.S. Coast Guard's helicopters circling around us at the moment. They're in and out, taking out the ones who are seriously injured and the pregnant women.
Bahamian Prime Minister Hubert Minnis called the devastation unprecedented and extensive, saying we are in the midst of a historic tragedy. There are a lot of questions to answer tonight after a scuba diving boat exploded into flames, trapping passengers below deck in the waters west of Los Angeles. The known death toll is high and could rise further in one of California's worst maritime disasters in decades. Emily Schmidt reports the latest.
After nearly 24 hours of searching, the Coast Guard made the call. With no new signs of distress, no new debris, the Conception diving boat rescue effort turned to recovery. The Monday Mayday call about the 75-foot diving boat came as 5 crew members on an upper deck escaped. Searchers believe everyone else was in sleeping quarters below.
It'd be perfectly normal for the crew to be up on that third deck. That was their assigned location to sleep.
One recording had a dispatcher asking about locks.
Roger, are they locked inside the boat?
Only the dispatcher's word could be heard, but one investigator says she believes victims were trapped by fire above.
There are no locked doors in accommodation spaces aboard these vessels. It's open berthing, and the only privacy that you have, and I'm sure that you've seen, because it's on the vessel's website, are curtains.
A former passenger of the Conception posted video clips from a January 2018 voyage, calling the crew very professional. A Coast Guard representative said the boat was required to have yearly checks. Now, the answers to what went wrong may come from interviews with the few survivors and from divers looking at the wreckage, which is now 65 feet below the water off Santa Cruz Island. Emily Schmidt, Currents News.
For the 9th time this year, the U.S. Bishops' Conference is issuing a statement in the wake of a mass shooting. The latest rampage taking place along a Texas highway linking Midland and Odessa when a gunman driving on the interstate murdered 7 people and wounded 25 more. Conference President Cardinal Daniel DiNardo is saying, once again, these horrific onslaughts demonstrate unequivocally the undeniable existence of evil in our society. Hundreds of people from Odessa and Midland joined in prayer over the Labor Day weekend. Texas Bishop Michael Sis, whose diocese include the 2 cities, is planning a series of special masses dedicated to peace and healing. In just a few hours, Pope Francis will leave Rome and fly to Africa. The Holy Father is visiting 3 nations on a mission that carries on the work first started by St. John Paul II. Melissa Butts reports from the Vatican.
On Wednesday, Pope Francis is departing for his 6th foreign trip of the year. He'll be going to the African continent for the 4th time during his pontificate. Sub-Saharan African countries Mozambique, Madagascar, and Mauritius are preparing to receive Pope Francis September 4th through the 10th. He'll come as a pilgrim of peace, hope, and reconciliation. 3 days in Mozambique kick off the trip. The Pope arrives a month after Filipe Nyusi, Mozambique's president, signed an agreement to end decades of armed hostility with the Renamo rebel leader. The Pope will meet with the president and government leaders just ahead of their October elections, and only months after Cyclone Ida killed thousands and affected millions.
A fin de que o Deus de país de todos consolide a reconciliação fraterna em Moçambique e na África inteira.
Pope Francis will then go to Madagascar for 2 days. He'll meet with Carmelite sisters and visit the tomb of Blessed Victor Razoamanarivo, a native who devoted her life to serving the poor and sick. He'll also meet with Argentinian Father Pedro Peca in Acamasoa, also called the Apostle of Garbage for his missionary work in the country. Madagascar is one of Africa's poorest nations, but it's rich in natural beauty.
Il vostro paese è famoso per le sue bellezze naturali e per queste diciamo laudato sì. È nostro dovere custodire con cura.
Pope Francis will conclude his trip by spending 8 hours in the small island of Mauritius. He'll visit a shrine dedicated to Blessed Jacques Décidé Laval, who cared for former slaves in the island in the 1800s. Nearly a quarter to a third of each nation's population is Catholic. Both Mozambique and Mauritius have 28.1%, and 34.8% of the population is Catholic in Madagascar. Pope Francis will be continuing the mission that John Paul II started over 30 years ago when he visited these countries marked by conflict, poverty, and the devastating effects of natural disaster. At the Vatican, Melissa Butts, Currents News.
Stay with us for more of our special coverage of the Pope in Africa. Crux Rome Bureau Chief Inés Martin will be joining us from the Eternal City. She's flying with the Holy Father. That's still ahead in this newscast. Before the Holy Father sets off for his trip, he took time to name 13 new red hats to the College of Cardinals. Pope Francis announcing the new appointments this weekend after a slight delay. The pontiff explained to the concerned crowd at his weekly Angelus that he had gotten stuck in an elevator just minutes before arriving at St. Peter's Square.
Prima di tutto devo scusarmi del ritardo, ma è stato un incidente. Sono rimasto chiuso nell'ascensore per 25 minuti. È stato un calo di tensione e si è fermato l'ascensore. Grazie a Dio sono venuti i vigili del fuoco. Ringrazio tanto a loro.
Of the 13 soon-to-be cardinals elected by the Pope, 10 are under the age of 80 and could participate in a conclave to elect a future pope. There's no American on the Pope's slate of new cardinals, but one of the men about to receive a red hat does have ties with the Brooklyn diocese, even though he's from Guatemala. Currents News' Tim Harfman explains.
Sunday's historic red hat announcement by Pope Francis hits home for Catholics in the Brooklyn diocese.
I went through the list and I stopped when I saw Ramazini, and I said, I know him.
Bishop Alvaro Ramazini y Mary of Guatemala is one of 13 newly elevated cardinals. He has a connection to the Brooklyn diocese, making visits here each year to St. Mary Star of the Sea and St. Gertrude Parish. Father Jim Cunningham is the former pastor of that parish in Far Rockaway, Queens. It's a community with a large Guatemalan population.
When they came here, it was like Guatemala was coming to them to let them know that they weren't forgotten.
Parishioners like Emma and Mario Chavaria are thrilled to hear the news.
Very happy because he's a wonderful person.
Immigrants from Guatemala themselves, they are close to Bishop Ramazini. Emma and Mario say the bishop's message to the Diocese of Brooklyn was always full of hope for migrants looking for better lives.
A lot of people, they don't have work, they don't have food. That's why a lot of people coming here. The people cry because how he's speaking, the people feeling.
The bishop would celebrate a special mass every year in Queens. Though his visits were short, he felt close to the parish. When Father Jim underwent a kidney transplant, Bishop Ramazini sent his well wishes.
I was taken aback that the call came from Guatemala. He took the time to call and reach out because he said he never forgot the great times that we had when he visited Far Rockaway.
In his new position, the 72-year-old bishop will be eligible to vote for future popes in closed-door conclaves since he is under the age of 80. The new cardinals will be installed on October 5th.
I wrote him a note, mailed it to Guatemala. I don't know how long it will take to get there, but I told him that we were so happy that Rockaway was rejoicing.
In Far Rockaway, Queens, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
The nation's largest display of Caribbean culture took place right here in Brooklyn this Labor Day weekend.
What do you think about Jesus?
The annual West Indian Day Parade showed colorful costumes and singing and dancing. For St. Matthew's Catholic Church along the route, it became a profession of faith. Parishioners sang Caribbean hymns and passed out rosaries along the parade route. Hundreds of people also packed the church for a special mass before the parade stepped off. Now for some exciting news to many Irish Catholics in the diocese. For the first time, a miracle at the Shrine to Our Lady of Knock has been officially recognized. Archbishop Michael Neary of Tuam, Ireland announced the confirmation on Sunday, saying there was no medical explanation for a woman's miraculous recovery after visiting the shrine. Marian Carroll had arrived at Knock in a stretcher 30 years ago, suffering from the early stages of what was thought to be multiple sclerosis. She pleaded with the Blessed Mother for healing, and immediately her symptoms ceased. Stay with us for news you won't see anywhere else. The Holy Father is about to leave for Africa, and joining him on his mission from takeoff to touchdown is Crux's Rome Bureau Chief Inés St. Martin. She breaks down what we can expect from the journey. City officials say the measles outbreak is over, but there's still a threat lurking ahead of the new school year. Plus, parents across the country are moving in their college kids, but at St. John's University, they aren't the only ones helping students prep for college life. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Continuing our coverage of the Pope's historic trip to sub-Saharan Africa, joining us now is Crux Rome Bureau Chief Inés St. Martin. She's flying with the Holy Father. And as Francis says, he is coming as a pilgrim of peace, hope, and reconciliation. He's visiting countries that are politically and socially unstable. How will he fulfill the theme of this mission?
Actually, that is a very good question, and it's something that at the end of the day, Pope Francis has become a bit of an expert on. He's really good trying to reach out to those in the outskirts. And of course, those who are at war with one another would fall under that category. He's seen violence firsthand. Of course, the situation he knows very, very well, which is that of Argentina, is very different to that he's going to find in Mozambique or in Madagascar. But still, there are some very common elements, including, I have to say, the extreme poverty that he's going to encounter in some of the stops he's going to be making.
You know, speaking of extreme poverty, the Pope kicks off the trip with 3 days in Mozambique. The UN ranks the nation among the world's poorest. He's also arriving not long before a national election, and the country is still living with the consequences of a civil war. What's on the Pope's agenda there?
It's all about peace. It's all about reconciliation, which is actually not all that different to what John Paul II tried to bring to this country when he visited in 1988. His whole message was about, yes, peace and reconciliation, and also the church's role when it comes to trying to mediate and help and foster dialogue between two sides that haven't seen eye to eye since the country's independence in the 1970s.
The next stop for Francis is Madagascar, an island nation off the coast of East Africa, also gripped by poverty. You've spoken with a missionary priest who spent the past 50 years in the country. What did he tell you about the reaction to the news that the Pope was coming?
The people were ecstatic. It's a very joyful event for them, and they're very much looking forward. This is what he encountered by, from the people he actually ministers to. We're talking about an Argentinian priest who speaks the Pope languages on every kind of major issue when it comes to global warming, when it comes to fighting poverty, and of course Argentinian, because everyone who speaks Spanish will tell you Argentinians have their own very much language. And this is something the Pope and this missionary have in common. And this is something this missionary has been able to bring and sort of impart in the people he serves in Madagascar. We're talking about some 30,000 people who were lifted up from poverty by this man and his mission.
The Pope also visiting Mauritius. It's another island nation with a small population, only a little more than 1 million people. Half the country is Hindu, the rest are Christians and Muslims. Why is the Pope going there?
I think it's a very interesting choice. First of all, because the Pope is all about fostering dialogue between different religions. And here you have a country in which three major religions actually live peacefully. But actually, I think one of the other reasons why the Pope is going to Mauritius is because of the fact that despite it's often described as, Africa's most developed economy or where people are better off, there is a hidden truth. The wealth that the country reports is actually not the country's wealth, but that of people who don't really want to pay taxes in their own countries. So you have a lot of corruption going on. So it's going to be very interesting to see the Pope speaking truth to power in a country that is seen as the miracle of Africa, but in his mind is probably not really.
And just really quick for us, this is the 31st apostolic journey for the Pope. How would you rank it in importance and possible outcomes?
I think it ranks pretty high. Africa is definitely in the heart of the Pope. We're talking about a man who wanted desperately to be a missionary priest, and he couldn't achieve that because of health issues. So it's going to be very interesting to see him in many ways. As we always see him when he's in Africa or when he's in Asia, living that boyhood dream almost of being a missionary priest. And it also has to be said, all three countries are mission territories for the Catholic Church. And October next month is, as Pope Francis requested, an extraordinary missionary month for the Catholic Church. So it's definitely a good impulse for that dream he has of a church that goes out to the outskirts.
And as San Martin, Crux Rome Bureau Chief, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
The Pope will be in Africa for a week, and Currents News will have special coverage that you won't find anywhere else. Inez will be at the Holy Father's side throughout the journey, and she'll report to us from Africa. The apostolic mission starts tomorrow. Before heading off for his trip, the Holy Father spoke with a group of doctors and cancer patients at the Vatican about deliberately ending lives. He voiced strong opposition against euthanasia.
La pratica dell'eutanasia, divenuta legale già in diversi stati, solo apparentemente si propone di incentivare la libertà personale. In realtà, essa si basa su una visione utilitaristica della persona.
The Holy Father said euthanasia is another example when people are seen as useless. He praised the doctors for fighting to preserve life. Still to come on Currents News, the measles emergency in New York City is lifted, but warnings remain. New neighbors for students arriving at St. John's and why these men and women are living in the university's dorms. And the tablet has a brand new page called Our Diocesan Family, where you can share your pictures of recent baptisms, Holy Communions, confirmations, marriage, all of the joyous sacraments. For more details and to submit your photos, go to thetablet.org/ourdiocesanfamily. Your picture may be published in an upcoming issue of the newspaper. We'll be right back. The measles emergency that gripped New York City for months is over tonight. Health officials are declaring that no new infections have been detected. More than 650 cases of measles hit the city in the past year, mostly centered in Orthodox Jewish neighborhoods. The city's health commissioner is warning parents to vaccinate their kids ahead of school because measles is one of the most contagious diseases on the face of the earth. Finally tonight, new students arriving at the Queens campus of St. John's University are finding new neighbors already there. Currents News' Tim Harfman is back with the story of how both groups are getting together.
A big day for Brennan Bailey and other new students at St. John's University. They're moving into their dorms where special neighbors are waiting to greet them. Brennan is from Colorado. He traveled across the country to the school in Queens because St. John's is a Catholic university.
Along with my great education I'm receiving, I'll also get a moral perspective on the world around me.
Helping to steer that moral compass are campus ministers, religious leaders who live in the residence halls.
How are you? Doing well. Good, Josh.
Brother Mike Sheeran is one of them, ready to talk and listen.
I'll say, so what is your experience of God like? Just a simple question like that. I've been amazed how that opens up possibilities.
Campus ministers have been at St. John's for 20 years, helping over 33,000 young men and women cope with homesickness, separation from parents, and their faith. Catholics make up a big chunk of the student body, but the college is open to students of all faiths. University President Dr. Bobby Gempasaw knows how important religion is.
College is not easy. There's so many deadlines and that they would have to meet. And having a strong faith is very helpful.
Megan Rodriguez is another campus minister, living in an apartment with her husband Jerry and 5-month-old daughter Gianna. She's devoted to assisting students get through the early days of college life.
This is a tough time. This is a time of transition. They're trying to figure out their vocation, and so as we can help them, accompany them in that process, that's what we're here to do.
But to have that guidance so close is so valuable and so important to seek out that help so you're not alone in this thing that we call life.
Besides talking and listening, the ministers reach out to students, encouraging them to attend Mass and participate in retreats. That way, Brother Mike hopes, the students will find Christ in the university's corridors.
We're not miracle workers, but we are invitational to consider the reality of God in their lives.
As these students settle into their new lives, Megan has some great advice.
Stay close to your faith, find good friends, talk to people, if you're struggling with something, talk to people, and definitely stay close to the Eucharist.
In Jamaica, Queens, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
That is Currents News. I'm Emily Druby. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.